when our song Alien first came out.
Rebellious rock for all kids all over. Not a bunch of old men playing music for your mothers and fathers. That's what you have now. It's what they call rock.
For instance?
Sticks.
Yeah.
This movement is basically working class. It's nothing to do with the arty-fart middle class, we're all right trip.
I worked in factories and I was a porter. Toilet cleaner. I had a good dead-end job. I was a grave digger for about a year before I started in the band.
Well, I mean, if there was jobs, then they wouldn't be on adult. And maybe we'd be singing about love and kissing.
We're doing something that's not ripping them off. We're standing up for them. And we're standing up for ourselves, and they can identify with it.
I think our music is very honest. It's the most honest thing that's been happening in our last 15 years. Nothing to beat it.
It was a chaos with attitude.
Made people wake up a bit.
And it just appeared as though there was no future unless you do something about it.
It was the only thing that told you, oh, that's the way out.
Can be followed out of boredom. You want to do something, you want to belong to something. In this society, it rejects you a lot. If you haven't got a job, you're rejected. So you've got to find a crowd to belong to feel someone, to be an individual.
Punks can range from office workers to dustbin men, to school kids. On the day you were born, you could be a punk. It's just an attitude. You just got to have it how you have it. I mean, punk to me wasn't just going out and disgusting people. It was having fun, you know. That's what it all means. Still having a laugh now. You know, gigs, they were the high points, you know, going to gigs and enjoying yourself. The crowds are more appreciative now. They'll soon let you know if you're crap.
Yeah, and who wants that? Why a program about punks in this day and age?
Well, punk is going into its second decade now. It's been around for over 10 years, and generally, it's been a fashion influence on every other form of popular music. I mean, punks were wearing studded wristbands long before Ozzy Osbourne, and Madonna basically got her look from the punkettes. But punk itself has gotten very little credit for its influence on the rest of the culture, and I just felt it was time to get it on MTV.
Well, here we are. Anything that this program needs to be?
Phil Donahue's guests this morning have a warning. They say, watch out for punk rock. It could be hazardous to your children's health. Let's go to Chicago.
I'd like to show you a picture of Jeff Hackert just 2 years ago. Here it is. He looks like the third baseman for a Little League team. Here is Jeff Hackert just 2 years later. Jeff, you are a punker, as we've come to know the group that is, you follow punk rock and you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Why do you look so bizarre, Jeff?
We work them up to the max, and then we trash the whole place.
Yeah, real damage.
We were, in the press, considered a menace to society.
Newport Beach police are concerned that a late-blooming punk rock movement is developing in the harbor area and have predicted a rough and even violent summer because of it.
People were so fearful of this new music and the way these people were dressing that you had cities trying to ban the shows, these squads of police that were going around with Polaroid cameras taking pictures of punks for files.
Elvis certainly was not received very well by parents, nor were the Beatles. You're saying this is different.
This is definitely different, Phil.
Psychologists and doctors talking about the dangers of your kids being into punk rock, it's sensational insanity.
I believe that the music I heard is a killer. It's a killer of hope. It's a killer of spirit.
You know why you people can't stomach our songs? Because they're a mirror, dig?
People hated you so much that they would actually stop what they were doing, get out of their car.
Hey, punk rock faggots, you know, we flipped them off. And they turned around and came back and we fought.
You could literally be killed for being a punk rocker.
If you walked down the street and saw somebody who looked like that, it was almost instantaneous that you became friends with that person.
You knew right away if somebody was on your team, and there wasn't many. You know, it was a secret kind of music and it was different.
When I found it, it was just the portal to the countercultural world I had been looking for.
Growing up as a kid, it was like you don't go backstage, you don't talk to the band, there's security, it's all of this kind of shit. So all of a sudden, here I am, some kid, I walk into the backstage area for the Plugs, and I go, oh, sorry, sorry, excuse me, man, I'm sorry. And Barry from the Plugs goes, hey, no problem, have a beer, kid. And I'm like, yeah.
Being this far from Dee Dee Ramone at Louis Rock City in Falls Church, Virginia, does make Frampton Comes Alive pretty pale in comparison. And you'll probably never be back to the arena very often.
I was going to the Starwood in Hollywood, seeing these great bands, and then coming back to school the next day and going, none of you guys even know what's going on. You just keep practicing your cheerleader cheers, and you keep passing that football, man, but you don't even have a fucking clue.
The music actually meant something to people. It gave like a lot of people like a belief, something to believe in. Like it gave people a platform to believe in and to express themselves.
What we was second generation punk. We believed in the hype of the first generation, which was like real working class, saying what you felt was wrong with society, and we was very angry, and this was our outlet.
Weapons of destruction roll again! Kingdom and country, what gets us combined?
And all of a sudden, music became very quickly this thing that was either going to be a huge part of our lives or our lives.
We went down to Madam's Organ for the first time and saw like the Bad Brains, and I was like, bam, this is it. It was seriously like an epiphany.
It was the summer of 1981.
So everybody had a band, My friend and I had a band, We had no songs, we had no instruments. We never played a show, we never, we're in the band,
How long have you guys been together?
8 months.
Yeah.
10 months. 8 or 10 months.
10 months?
10 hours? Yeah.
Bands were being formed because bands weren't touring and coming to Washington. It's like, well, if we're not on the same New York, LA thing where every band that's specific to what we like comes there, we'll make our own bands.
It's just shouting. And I thought, well, I can do that.
I'm going to go to the bathroom, you sing. Okay, what are we doing? I've never sung in a band before. You're in a band now, till he gets back from the bathroom.
Bands would come out that were brand new with friends that were in the bands. They say, hey, we're playing our first show, and we go and watch them, and you just get blown away. Because there were no rules. It could be anything. You could just be smashing a typewriter with a sledgehammer, and that was totally cool. Like, wow!
It didn't matter if anybody had any talent or could do anything. It was whether they had the balls and the guts to get up and do it.
We did it for fun, and also because we wanted to challenge the boundaries, and we wanted to get people to think, and we wanted to politicize people.
Various versions of socialism and anarchy and sort of mixes of in-between things like that were coming out through lyrics that were either informed or innocent, but just basically said, we want to run our own lives.
Say to people who are reading what I'm saying about punk that
you can talk about religion,
it doesn't mean just dressing like the people whose records you buy dress. It means thinking for yourself. And actually, like, if you're a punk, I mean, why aren't you playing in a band? Why aren't you writing your own fanzine? Why aren't you doing something? I mean, if you feel upset about the system, why aren't you going out and protesting about it? Why aren't you on a right to work march? That's what punk means. It means fighting back. It don't mean sitting down like and getting stoned, man, and all that sort of stuff. It don't mean that at all. It means going, bang, we don't want this, we're going to fight it. Or it means forming a band and saying, having a good time, you've got to do something.
They shoot the real small. You can't cut.
It was not just like some local phenomenon, it was like a national, and then we discovered slowly it was like international phenomenon that was going on.
DC had it going on. Boston, New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco. Everyone had like cool bands.
As records started coming out and fanzines started developing to like talk about the records that were coming out, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
And you hear about this band that you read about, and so you send off for the Black Flag Nervous Breakdown EP through the mail. And the bass player sends you the EP and says, hey, can we sleep on your floor when we come through town? And all of a sudden, Joey Shithead from DOA is camping out on your floor, and the Subhumans are living at your buddy's place down the street, and everyone's networking.
That whole kind of circuit started the DIY thing by exchanging numbers.
There was a network of fake phone credit card numbers that people used to pass around. I got a new number for you, because nobody could afford the phone bills for all the work we were doing. So entire tours were being booked off of just these fake credit card numbers.
If I want to, I will take you. She's only 50.
We were just putting on shows, renting out clubs, renting out halls, wherever we could do shows at.
Kids live for music. So how ironic that the music they live for, they can't go see because they're not old enough to see it. We were really committed to the idea of getting these venues open to kids. So we just went to the club and said, look, we're not going to drink. We're going to put these big black X's on our hands. If we have the X's on our hands, you see us drinking, kick us out of the clubs forever. And in return for that, let us come to the gigs.
We had the feeling, if we could ever get this to teen audiences, and people would really like it because it's like the rebirth of the spirit of rock and roll that corporations and major labels went so far out of their way to kill.
In the early stages, there were no record labels at all that wanted to work with the band, let alone major record labels. It was kind of like, this is crazy shit. They didn't look at it like a viable commodity like they do today. They looked at it like an insurance risk.
We're out there yelling and screaming, and to Warner Brothers, like, was it sort of bug in here? No, it's punk rock down here. Oh, well,
It became pretty much evident that if we wanted to put this record out, we were just going to have to put it out ourselves.
It took us a few months to figure out how to do it. We didn't want anyone to think that we were trying to cash in. So we said, any money that comes back from this single, we'll put into putting out another band in DC.
Of course, the major label's not going to sign us, and we wouldn't want to be with them anyways. What do we want to have anything to do with them? So we started our own label.
Initially, it was just your close friends that were playing, and within, it seemed like 6 months, you'd see the parties. It was 50 people here, and then it was like 100, then it was like 200, and then it got to the point where they shut down the party before you can play.
Then the Buzzcocks come to town, or the Clash, and all of a sudden, who are all these people? Cramps play the Psychedelic. Place the size of this room. It's a big deal. Like 300 people? Ew. I don't know every name in this room. Sell out.
Once the media started popularizing it, then all these people started showing up, and it was like, well, we saw this on TV, or we saw this in this movie, we saw this photo, so we figured this is the way that we have to behave.
Anyway, the punks took the pogo step, went wild, invented the slam. Well, the more people you bash, the better slam dancer you are.
Did the dancers get hurt?
Well, that's the idea. Band-Aids and bloody noses are punk status symbols.
Probably for the first half of the 80s, Black Flag was perceived as the thing, or one of the things. Like bands would think, if I could just get up there. And up there meant sleeping on people's floors, not having any place to live, being poor all the time, this type of thing. And that was the top.
We were like a shark. If we stopped moving, we didn't eat. You know, that van had to keep moving from gig to gig, or there's no food.
I mean, I think one of the most important chapters of the history of rock and roll, history of music, was the time that all the kids got together, wrote their own songs, formed their own bands, put on their own shows, put out their own records, made their own magazines, set up their own touring networks, you know, set up this whole thing, and the major labels were completely unaware.
So Mike, tell us about the tour so far. Well, here we are, and boy, what a show it is. Look.
Luckily, NoFX stayed together through the late 80s because all our friends' bands, you know, SNFU and RKL, they all called it quits because there weren't a lot of fans out there.
I think it was just a very low ebb for punk rock. I mean, there just wasn't much happening right then.
A lot of metal, you know, not a lot of punk. There were a few bands in America that were playing punk in the late 80s.
I even remember like the Anti-Club, which was supposed to be like the last holdout of punk clubs or whatever, said, yeah, we're not really booking punk bands.
We just played backyard parties and stuff before that with other punk bands that couldn't get a venue to let them play.
When we first started, it was like everybody was playing fast, everybody was playing aggressive, everybody was macho. You know, everybody was taking off their shirt and showing off their muscles to other young boys taking off their shirts and showing their muscles. And we were like, well, you know, that's not what we want to do. We want to get into more of songwriting.
Bad Religion came back in '88 with Suffer, and that was the first melodic punk album, it seemed to me, in 4 or 5 years.
For us, that was a big influence. Their music and their lyrics especially were really cerebral and had a lot to do with the human condition and our evolution as a species.
But I think that just kind of started something that just kind of slowly festered.
We put out a pretty decent record, so it kind of reignited the scene in a way. It was right after that Operation Ivy put out their record. So all of a sudden that year, you know, 2 really killer records had come out of the West Coast.
You know, Operation Ivy was such a huge band to me. They were just like, I was 15 years old when I got into that band. I just remember thinking, like, this is like the greatest band in the world.
So that's when the punk renaissance started.
There was always a few punk rock, you know, splashes in the mainstream, but not from a young new band that was really part of a movement until.
Campbell Benzinato, he was on there, he was waiting for me. While the punk rockers and the moon stompers who were out on the corners were despairing for chance.
Green Day. Green Day. Like The Offspring.
And I love The Offspring.
The Offspring and Pennywise, Rancid. Rancid.
You know, Green Day, Rancid.
Green Day and Rancid and The Offspring.
I'm surprised it took as long as it did with punk. Part of the reason, I guess, was because the music was so intense, it delayed the inevitable mass embrace. And I figured it was going to happen sooner or later. I mean, the music was too good.
Up until Nirvana, Bad Religion and Fugazi had been kind of running neck and neck in a quiet competition of how big can this get? Because when Ian in a warehouse out in DC and me and Brett in a warehouse on Santa Monica Boulevard each start pushing out like 120,000 albums independently. I mean, punk rock had never been that big in this day and age.
I just kind of proceeded to sign a few bands, but all of them did pretty well. I signed L7. The next band I signed was NoFX. Then I signed Pennywise, The Offspring, Rancid. Almost every single band I signed did as well or better than the last one.
You wanna make a move, then you better come in. Ability, the reason that we're so fit. We're living and you're dying. The stories are true. The
secret to a caress, knowing you're through. Black golden white shoes, like that Cadillac. The boys are trying bomb. Black golden white shoes.
Punk rock's been a creeping virus for a long time. But it really went off like a bomb in '91.
Nirvana comes out and sells 5-6 million records, and it just was like, wow, that's completely out of the ballpark. Followed quickly by The Offspring, Green Day, and it was just over. It was just like, wow, this is way bigger than anyone ever
That's when, if not pure punk music, punk-inspired music, became a commercial phenomenon in this country.
Well, I wouldn't take credit for breaking punk to the mainstream. No, I think that would be a dubious honor anyway.
Which kind of breaking?
The reason Green Day broke was because they put in a lot of hard work on their own before they were signed to a major label, and they had built up an audience that was very, very relevant. They stayed at people's houses, they built relationships with their fans. At the same time they were doing that, they were writing great songs that also went on the radio. They happened to make great videos.
When we made Smash, we thought the last thing that was going to happen was a video on MTV.
I know, play with me. That's okay, 'cause I got no self-esteem. Oh, yeah,
Once we actually had a record that did well and became sort of successful, then it's even much harder to defend the idea that you're a punk band. If you have a song that is heard on radio and you're sort of in the mainstream, you know, maybe it is a contradiction in terms.
When our song Alien first came on the radio, it was really strange. I mean, we'd been playing on the radio a couple times here and there on local radio, but not like, 3 or 4 times a day. It was kind of bittersweet because you're feeling like, okay, we finally conquered, the powers that be, and they gave in to us and stuff. But at the same time, your friends are calling you up going, dude, what the hell are you doing on the fucking radio?
It's cool that some of these bands get exposed, but at the same time, the people that like these bands have been with them for so long, and maybe at one point, radio wasn't too friendly to those bands.
There's mass media vehicles that didn't exist for punk rock in 1981. Radio, MTV, magazine.
You were lucky to get your stuff played on college radio, let alone anything commercial.
Regardless if you're in a punk band or not, it's weird to hear yourself on the radio for the first time.
I was at work when I first heard it on the radio.
I'm driving home in a 77 Monte Carlo with my painter's whites on, and Prison Bound comes on the radio, and a car pulls up next to me, and I just I'm gonna just do know if this is me on the radio, man. I'm still painting houses, but
also playing with the Dwarves,
it's nice
one of the more violent bands who used to headline for Nirvana.
The real victory for us, I think, was when Fuck Authority got played on the radio. We all really liked that song, and we thought it would be a great song for the radio, but who's going to play a song called Fuck Authority?
He just talks time and time and time again. Because we play more music.